On Thursday, Senator Leah Webb honored 4 local community servants across District 52 with one of the highest honors a state senator can give, the Commendation Award. The award recognizes people who have made significant or lasting contributions to their communities through either volunteering or service, with a focus on improving the lives of others in the southern tier. One of the award recipients was Chief Wayne Friedman of the City of Cortland Fire Department, who received the award for his role as a firefighter and his dedication to the City of Cortland.
I'm very humbled by this award, and you know, it's still hard to believe. I try to do my best to improve safety for my firefighters, not only in Cortland but across the state. I'm fortunate enough to instruct officers in New York State.
The New York State Senate Commendation Award celebrates exceptional leadership and dedication. The other recipients included the Executive Director of Southside Community Center in Ithaca, founder of Rejoice the Vote, and the First Ward Action Council's Executive Director.